to the Current Conversations podcast. My name is Savannah Hugdahl, and I'm the county's Public Communications Multimedia Specialist. Today we're going to be talking to my boss, Quentin Shepard, the Community Engagement and Public Information Director, and we're talking about Flood Awareness Week.
That's right, Savannah. Thank you for having me today.
Thanks for giving me some of your time. This is a topic that is not new to people in Gloucester, and there's a lot to talk about with it, but I wanted to start and kind of talk about the why and then the what, because I think being surrounded by water so much, people have a tendency to tune this kind of stuff out, and it's important. So let's talk a little bit about why flood awareness is important for Gloucester in particular.
So, a lot of times, a lot of us who live in portions of Gloucester County, when we travel throughout the county, we don't see the water necessarily, so it's kind of off of our radar. But pretty much if you travel on the eastern side and southern side of the county, there are many, many acres of low-lying areas that will flood easily, and it doesn't necessarily take a storm to do it. We've had some pretty significant just high tide events over the past year, not connected to any hurricane or tropical storm or northeast storm, but just because the tides were running high, and it's caused us significant problems. So it's important to try to remember that we are vulnerable. These areas are vulnerable for flooding. And that's kind of why the state has made the week of March 9th through the 15th Virginia Flood Awareness Week.
Okay. I know that flooding is actually a pretty big public safety issue, because you think about, there's water over the road, it's not a big deal. What are some of the statistics on flooding and people being in danger?
Well, that's one of the biggest risks that we have, aside from obviously property damage, is people. There's no way to gauge. When you're in a vehicle, there's no way to gauge how deep that water is in front of you. You think that you might be able to get through it with just, an inch or two coming up around your tires, but it could be enough to engulf half or more of your vehicle. So there's just no way of knowing, and that's why Virginia Department of Emergency Management and others use that slogan, "Don't drown, turn around." Or I may have gotten that backwards, but anyway, you want to, it's not worth the risk.
I was reading in the flood awareness pamphlet, which is going out to everyone pretty soon, isn't it one of the highest storm death tallies comes from people trying to drive through floodwaters, and their car gets swept away.
That's right. We've seen it on the news how, all the time where a car gets swept away by floodwaters, and sometimes folks are fortunate and are able to be rescued from that, but other times it's not so fortunate for them. So
I guess as we're going into this, I just wanted to remind everybody, you've heard it before. Listen again. Just keep it in your brain. Make sure you're telling your neighbors who are maybe new to Gloucester or your kids to be careful around floodwaters. Let's talk about what the government can do to warn people about these flood events.
So, we try to be very transparent and very vigilant with our residents regarding flood situations. Anytime that there are flood events in the county, we work, as you well know, Savannah, in our department with public information, we work closely with emergency management. They keep us up to date on current weather events, and that includes flooding. So we try to get the word out using, social media platforms, our Be Alert emergency notification system, to alert people when we anticipate conditions could be bad for flooding or prolonged flooding. Another interesting thing that we do as a county is we're part of the National Flood Insurance Program's community rating system. So this is a system that gives us points based on a number of different things. And one of those large components is outreach on flood awareness. And so that's why one of the reasons why we're putting out this flood awareness guide that you mentioned earlier. That gets sent out to every resident, every residential address in the county with know your zone information, which maybe we can hit on that a little bit later. Mm-hmm. What you should look for in flood insurance when you're looking to purchase flood insurance. What the county can do to help you. All of these things work toward this community rating system score that we receive. And we recently improved our score in that. Essentially, we're a Class 5 community now, which means all of our residents that have flood insurance receive a 25% discount on their premiums for flood insurance. So that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, that adds up quick.
It takes a lot of work and a lot of effort on the part of our building inspections department, our engineering department, administration, public information components. We also have a floodplain management advisory committee that meets every quarter.
You're part of that, right?
I am a member of that. So that's a group of private citizens. We've got a good mix of folks on there that really know what they're talking about, from insurance adjusters to engineers to developers, land surveyors, and the list goes on and on. This committee was formed and continues to work to come up with ways to mitigate some of the damages that's done locally by flood events, and they've been working on that for quite a while now.
That's awesome. So I know whenever we're talking about an emergency, the first priority is life safety.
Correct.
Of people, responders, everybody. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to ensuring safety in floods, we listen closely to our alerts. Mm-hmm. So can you kind of talk to me about the types of alerts people would get related to a flood and what they mean?
Yeah, so we'll just take a few examples. So there's 3 different alerts that are primarily dealing with flooding. So the first is a coastal flood advisory. This type of alert is issued when we can expect minor or nuisance coastal flooding. It could be occurring then, or it could be coming soon. A lot of times this is when you just have a little bit of water coming up over the roads, some water in your property and low-lying areas, that type of thing. The next advisory would be a coastal flood watch. That's typically issued by the National Weather Service when moderate to major coastal flooding is possible. So this type of flooding would then, potentially pose a serious risk to lives and property. And then the most severe is the coastal flood warning, which is issued when moderate to major coastal flooding is occurring or is imminent. And this type of flooding will pose a serious risk to life and property.
Okay, so don't wait till it's a warning.
Don't wait till it's a warning. Basically, if you see the advisory come out, kind of keep an eye on it. If there's a watch, that's when you need to really start taking steps to prepare.
Make your plan, talk to your
Correct.
family.
Mm-hmm.
Know where you're evacuating to.
Absolutely. And that kind of takes us back to know your zone. So know what zone that you are in. There is a website that you can go to that is knowyourzoneva.org. And basically, the state has developed hurricane evacuation zones for coastal areas throughout Virginia. It's designed to enhance current evacuation plans, boost public safety, and improve travel efficiency in the event of hurricanes or other disasters. So the map shows 4 different evacuation zones, A through D, and they're kind of data driven based on, low-lying properties that are vulnerable to flooding. The data is based on historic storm surge measurements, and they combine that with projected effects of the storms. So how intense the storm that is coming may be, its path, speed, current tidal, and other meteorological factors. So, looking at Gloucester's map, much of the Guinea Neck area, Naxira area is, the Severn area is in what we consider evacuation zone A. Typically, that's when we have a fairly low-grade hurricane, tropical storm. You'll see evacuation of that area. Then as you go further inland, that's when you get to the zones B, C, and D. If we get to zone D evacuations, then you're looking at a pretty major situation.
And I know that we've touched on this before, but it's so important to heed those evacuations, not just to save your life and your family, which we want you to do, we care about you, but it also takes the burden off of our volunteer fire departments who are going to be overworked in any kind of situation where there's major flooding, because actually a lot of our firefighters who volunteer here are employed with other local agencies. And if there's a flood event that's affecting us so badly, it's also going to be affecting our neighbors, where our firefighters have their paid jobs and they might be called over there.
Exactly.
So we need to be focused on making things as safe for everybody, and that means evacuating when you get the notice.
That's right. So, and in Virginia, there's no real forced evacuation. So, in some areas you'll see people going around and kind of strongly encouraging or forcing people out of their homes to safety. Virginia, we can strongly encourage people to leave, but you cannot make people evacuate their homes. So, it's important to understand that piece about the fire and rescue. We have 2 very dedicated volunteer fire and rescue squads in the county. Both of those squads, when conditions get beyond a certain point where they deem that it's unsafe for their personnel to go out to help somebody, they're not going to go. They're not going to risk their equipment. They're not going to risk their lives in an event that there has been an evacuation issued.
So beyond life safety, which is obviously the most important. And we've covered evacuations, we've covered warnings, we've covered turn around, don't drown. I think the next thing we think about in a major flooding event is the preservation of property.
Correct.
What should people be thinking about if their house is in a flood zone?
First off, make sure that you have adequate flood insurance. Your general homeowner's insurance does not cover flood damage, so you need to make sure that you have a decent flood insurance policy.
And you can't get that right away, can you? That's like a 30-day wait.
It is. So other than that, things that you can do to kind of help mitigate. If you know that you're in a flood zone and you've recently seen where floodwaters have impacted your home, there are grants and loans out there to get your home elevated. You want to have your buildings so that the floodwaters can go underneath. All of this information really can be found in that flood awareness guide that's coming out next week.
And that'll be in everybody's mailbox. But if you, for some reason, don't see it, we're also going to put it on gloucesterva.gov.
Correct.
And all of our social media platforms, of course.
I think those are the big topics. Just a few things on how the county can help you. Our building inspections department works closely with this type of material. They can provide information to you on how to select a qualified contractor to do the elevation work. They will conduct visits to your site to review flooding, drainage, or sewer problems. They can provide one-on-one advice to property owners on flood proofing or retrofitting techniques when it comes to your home and improvements. They can even help locate your property on the flood insurance rate maps. So a lot of good resources there. That department can be reached by phone at 804-693-1217. Or you can always stop by the office during regular business hours.
Yet another reason to talk to building inspection before you go to build anything. You want to make sure if you're setting a house up, that it's high enough up, you won't have to worry about all this later.
Absolutely. And then, make sure that you've signed up for the emergency alert. I cannot stress that enough. It's a huge tool. It may sound extreme, but, these alerts, they come straight to your phone, either via text, voice call, or your email. They can help you know what's coming so that you can prepare your property and possibly even help save your life if it's a imminent threat such as a tornado or something like that. And then, the other thing to just keep in mind too is, a lot of times these events can cause power outages. So Dominion Energy doesn't always know when there's an outage, and you can't always depend on your neighbor to call. So just if you keep in mind with any situation, report your outage, dominionenergy.com/outages to make sure you're covered. Any of this information, again, can be found in that flood awareness guide or by visiting vaemergency.gov. The county, Gloucester County, also has on our website a whole page dedicated to flood information.
Wow, that's a lot. I'm glad it's written down because it's all important and it's hard to take all of this away from, one sit-down conversation. Mm-hmm. But going back to the B alerts point, which I think is really important, not just for flooding and storms, but for any kind of emergency in Gloucester. One of the things that I didn't realize until I became a public information officer is that everyone's phone does not get tornado alerts the same way.
That's right.
There's not really a setting where you can turn it on or off. Mm-hmm. It's kind of up to the phone company whether you're going to get a tornado alert that buzzes you awake or not. And if you don't know if you're getting those or not, you should sign up for some sort of alert so that you will get a call if a tornado's on the way. Mm-hmm. No one wants to, wake up with their bed flying through the sky.
No, that's a rude awakening for sure. And, again, people, when they sign up, they can put in their own preferences of what types of alerts they want to receive. If they don't want to receive, they're not in a flood zone. If they don't want to receive flood warnings, they don't have to opt into that. They can just receive tornado warnings or
road closures,
that type of thing.
And how do they sign up for
that? The best way to sign up is by calling the emergency management department at 804-693-1390. That way somebody there can help you, walk you through the process, or they can take your information and put it in manually.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time, Quentin. I appreciate you coming on. And everyone, check your mailboxes. Pamphlet coming soon.